We've got an expanded and enhanced risk for severe storms with very large hail potential across Texas today. And those storms will be shifting eastbound with very heavy rain and a lot of wind associated with them. So let's start off with the latest update from the Storm Prediction Center. And this is as of 8 a.m. this morning. And they did, in fact, expand this to an enhanced risk that essentially moves across a good part of Texas from all the way to the Red River, all the way down into South Texas, where we're watching a pretty strong cold front for this time of year, and a powerful low pressure center will be coming across. And it's all about the warm front, how far north that gets later on this afternoon. And right around the triple point, things are really going to be starting to explode across portions just south of the DFW Metroplex. I think right southwest of the Metroplex around 2 to 3 o'clock this afternoon, and then they're going to be elongating along this boundary north to south, and they will really start to fill in with, I think, the heaviest activity basically south of the I-30 corridor. So they do, in fact, have a large expanded hatched risk. What they mean by that is that 2-inch type, hail potential as this system will be coming across. I do think further north, this is probably a little bit overdone for a hatched risk. I am expecting the largest potential hailstorms basically south of the I-30 corridor into portions of the Waco area, down here portions into the Austin area. Those areas could actually experience some golf ball to possibly even some tennis ball size hail later on this afternoon. And as we move across and look at the tornado parameters, it's not zero, but it's not very significant with this particular setup. So you never can roll out one or two isolated tornadoes, but definitely the main risk with this setup is the large to possibly even some very large hail associated with these storms. So let's take a look at the dew points, because that's going to be crucial as we enter to this afternoon. So as we walk you through time, you can follow along at the top, above my head here. You can see down south, that's where the warm front is. So we're watching this boundary where the cold front is going to be coming in from the northwest with some pretty cold air associated with it. And as we watch the moisture surge, it depends on how much moisture is going to be associated with the storm system that's going to feed into the storm. As these dew points start to rise, you can actually see by the time we get into the 11 o'clock this morning, it's in the low 60s down here into central Texas, and those will continue to lift a little bit further north, headed into towards the Dallas-Fort Worth area right around 1, 2 o'clock. You can stop the clock here. This is right around this area. You can actually see this little hook trying to form here. That is your triple point where the low pressure and the cold front are going to be meeting. I think that's when things start to erupt right basically southwest of the DFW Metroplex. We should start to see supercell thunderstorms start to break out in this region. And as they do, these will rapidly explode and erupt and along this boundary from north to south. And as they moved eastbound across the Metroplex and across into central Texas, this whole area will be feeding towards the moisture down further south. So that's why I feel it has the greatest potential to see in some of those larger hailstones the further south you live. And as we walk you through time, you can see by 4, 5, 6 o'clock, I think this is the heaviest activity essentially from 2:30 to about 6, 7 o'clock time frame across DFW, across central Texas. There's a very short window for like that really severe, intense hailstones. This is going to be a very fast moving system. So the initial setup, we've got to be concerned about those large hail producers. But again, these are going to be really fairly fast moving systems. And then once that clears out, the atmosphere will stabilize a little bit. You still could get some larger hail, but the most intense part is really going to be just kind of a narrow window there, probably about an hour or two, that you could see some of those very large hailstones in that environment as this system will be coming across. And then, but still have that severe stuff. So I do feel like weather watches will be issued by the time we get into that 2 o'clock this afternoon time frame along this corridor, and likely last into the say 9, 10 o'clock time frame this evening. But you can see definitely as the cold front comes through that stabilizes the atmosphere, you're probably going to get back back building type setup and get more storms through the late evening time frame towards the midnight time frame. And we'll go over the latest radar update. But let's look at the temperature. So as we look at the temperatures, it's more concerning what the actual moisture is, but this is the overall temperatures as that warm front will continue to feed up from the south. You can see a sharp gradient here. We've got 97 degrees in Del Rio, and it's in the 40s in Amarillo, right? And that's about 2 o'clock this afternoon. But notice the upper 80s to near 90 degrees down here just southwest of the Metroplex. This is the boundary that we've got to be concerned about as the heat continues to pump in from the south, and it's all clashing with that low pressure center along that triple point. That's where things are going to be starting to explode. You can actually see the temperature start to go down a little bit. 3-4 o'clock, that's when supercell thunderstorms are going to be erupting into that atmosphere and then really exploding. And then you have the cold front coming through about 8-9 o'clock. So that's when things start to clear out as far as maybe the severe storms across the Metroplex and across into portions of central Texas. And then the leftover stuff could have some elevated, isolated, severe stuff with it, but not the most intense part of the system. And then, yes, by the time we get in that 10 o'clock time frame, you're dropping into the 50s across much of North Texas, across much of Central Texas, and that just shifts off into East Texas, later on this evening. But notice how cold it gets. Notice how cold it gets up here in the panhandle of Texas. I mean, that's pretty cold stuff for this time of year in the 30s, guys. So that's a pretty stronger cold front for this time of year. As things, I think, clear things out right probably around after midnight time frame. So let's take a look at the overall radar setup. How this is all going to unfold. So that's basically your cold front up top, up there near the panhandle of Texas this morning. And then as we move through time, notice about the noon time frame, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing in Texas. The warm front's lifting from the south, the cold front's coming in. They're all waiting for that, initiation point. And I think that's really going to be taking shape. Look at that, 2 o'clock, right? There's about 2 o'clock. We're probably going to be seeing tornado watches or severe thunderstorm watches being issued by that time. This is the DFW Metroplex. This is basically southwest. This is south of the I-20 corridor. These storms should start to erupt into isolated supercell thunderstorms, where they're likely going to be severe and have that larger hail potential, and then expanding going into that 3 o'clock time frame. These are all isolated supercells well ahead of the cold front, right? And as these continue until the 4 o'clock time frame, again, these kind of expand from north to south, right? So they start to elongate into that boundary. These are the ones that we have to be most concerned about, of those very large hail potential. Yes, this atmosphere has the potential to produce some golf balls, some even up to tennis ball size hail. Now, obviously, not everybody's going to get that. These are just isolated areas that could have the potential to see that. And the reason why the Storm Prediction Center has such a huge swath of these storms are going to be moving fairly quickly. So this whole entire environment on the initial stage, even though we're only in a 1, maybe 2 hour window where you could see some of those larger, more intense hailstones, that's why they have such an expanded swath, in that region. But there's around 5 o'clock, right? So notice most of the activity, or the most intense activity, is essentially south of the I-30 corridor, really feeding into that moisture surge with the higher dew points further south. These are places like into Waco, maybe into the Clean area, feeding down into the Austin region. Less likely, these possibly might be severe across the DFW Metroplex, but not nearly as intense as what you're going to be getting just south of the I-30 corridor. And as these continue to move across, again, we have to watch these initial boundaries going into the 6 o'clock time frame into central Texas, have some big time hail producers associated with them. And then you get some back building action back behind before the cold front. And these, again, could be some isolated severe stuff, but not nearly as intense as what you're going to see in the main initial system. And then that will feed down into the central Texas, going all the way down into San Antonio. This is why they do have that enhanced risk for all this entire area to get hit with possibly has the potential, some of those larger hailstones associated with it. And then there's about 10, 11, and there's midnight time frame. So you still have some activity across North Texas as the activity will move further south into South Texas. And then I think that starts to wind down once we get into the wee hours of the morning. Just some stronger storms by then into the wee hours of the morning, heading into East Texas and clearing out for most of North Texas by then. But look at the helicity tracks, right? And this is the potential of the greatest updrafts. So you have these updrafts that come in where we could see some of these larger hail producers. Again, this is south of the Metroplex. This is going into more or less central Texas and into, right there along the Waco region, probably Stephenville, down here in these regions, down here further south into San Antonio, getting into the Austin region, even in portions of the Houston area, could see some higher potential, some of these updrafts. Let's just expand the view and take a look at the overall big picture, because there's a lot happening. There's that powerful cold front dumping more snow into portions of Colorado. There we got some heavy rains across a good part of portions of Pennsylvania. DC is going to get some really heavy rain this afternoon. And as we move the clock, you can actually see this powerful low pressure center that's going to be building up along the Great Lakes. It's got more cold air for April standards as these storms will be coming across Texas. And as we continue to move through the midnight time frame, like I mentioned, these are going to be clearing out in a good part of Texas, now going to be shifting into portions of Arkansas, as that same system will be lifting up into the northeastern states, back into Jersey, back into New York City. These areas could pick up some 1 to 2 inch rainfall just in the next 24 to 48 hours, while that we have another powerful system that's going to be coming across going into Saturday. So there's going to be a bona fide low pressure center that's going to be developing further south. There's also going to be an intense low pressure center developing further north, and that's the colder core associated with it. And all this feeds eastbound. So as we expand the view and take a look at the latest European guidance, we can actually see this all play out. So we've got the system that comes across Texas, right? You've got that one low pressure center further south into Louisiana and the Gulf of Mexico. You got the northern side of it too, that's got all the colder air associated with it, that's pumping still some snow along the Great Lakes regions because it's definitely cold enough. But all this kind of merges together. This comes up. I mean, we got an intense low pressure center, 994 for Sunday morning. This will be coming up the coast here. So this is going to be having a lot of winds associated with it and very heavy rainfall. So I'm expecting some isolated flash flooding in a lot of these regions. So expect to get good soaking rain. So that's today. And then you head into this weekend going into Sunday, and there's Monday time frame as this powerful low pressure center will be swinging up into the northeast with very heavy winds. And look at that, down to a 985 millibar low pressure. That's a pretty intense storm as that comes across. And then, again, dumping some very heavy rain and then colder air in the backside of this with heavier snows going into the first part of May here, right? And so this is some definitely cold stuff. But notice the rest of the country is pretty clear. There's not much happening out west. You got a ridge of high pressure building out west. They're going to be hot and dry out there. And then once things move across the central states today, things clear out for a nice weekend across a good part of the central U.S. because there's by Sunday, all the action is well east and heading up into the eastern corridor, while much of the rest of the country experience some really nice weather unfolding. And then that system will continue to wind up the coast on Monday, really rapidly deepening up there, but the Great Lakes dumping some heavier snows and the UP and Michigan regions, and then that will continue to wind up, continuing with that rainfall well into the Tuesday time frame, while we finally might have some action start to come back in portions of the central U.S. where things may start maybe getting a little bit more wetter by the time we head into maybe that Thursday time frame across a good part, say, of the West with that other system. But once this moves out, we've got pretty good clearing skies across a good part of the West and central part of the U.S., and all the action will be well east. going into Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday timeframe. And then we'll have to watch out west again as another system will be coming in by the time we get into the middle of next week. So definitely stay weather aware. If you're down there in Texas today, for some of those big time hail producers, I'm expecting weather watches to be issued by, say, 2 o'clock this afternoon. So you got that window of, say, 2 to 9 o'clock with really severe stuff, but the main window is only about 1 to 2 hours of the most intense part of the severe storms later on this afternoon. So catch me next update while I protect you before and after the storm.